What do you think, or might ask, does a Treasurer's call for Australians to work longer and Energy Minister's fears about blackouts this summer and plans to scale back the capacity of a dam in Queensland, all because of the cost of fixing it, have in common? Well, each in their own way is a sign of how our country is starting to go backwards because we've all been so captured by political correctness and the politics of running away from hard decisions. In a speech tonight in Sydney, Josh Frydenberg will remind us that 40 years ago there were 7 working-age people for every person over 65. Today there are only 5 workers for every retiree, and in 4 decades hence there'll only be 3. Now, the Treasurer is right to say that we need to increase workforce participation in order to meet demographic challenges, but that's only part of it. What we really need to do is what we used to do until the green religion started to get in the way, and that was to make the most of Australia's natural assets, assets that others around the world give their eye teeth to have just a quarter of what we take for granted in coal, gas, uranium, landmass, productive farming land and more. If you asked me what's the biggest contemporary problem facing our nation, that's it. It's that we're neglecting to do what's so obviously needed if we are to make the most of our future and avoid the genteel decline that's staring us now in the face. Here's why. 20 years ago, Australia was an energy superpower with amongst the world's lowest electricity prices and with heavy industry and well-paid manufacturing jobs on the back of this comparative economic advantage. People could leave school in this country. They could get a job in a trade or industry, and working hard, they could get ahead, own their own home, and in financial terms at least, raise their families with confidence. But not anymore. We've all but thrown away that economic advantage in our misguided quest to save the planet on Australia's shoulders alone, replacing affordable and reliable coal-generated electricity with power that only works when the wind blows and the sun shines, and we've continued the demonisation of nuclear that just doesn't match the technological reality of its widespread use elsewhere in the world. In the absence of new baseload power, Federal Energy Minister Angus Taylor said today 1.3 million Victorian households are facing blackouts or brownouts this summer. Industry too will cop load shedding. That's a nice bureaucratic way of saying forced power outages, because the state can no longer provide power to industry and household air conditioners at the same time on a hot day. And this is the fate that's coming to New South Wales as well once the giant Liddell power station closes without any prospect of being replaced by 24/7 generation. Today, the Federal Energy Minister Angus Taylor says he's thinking about imposing a reliability requirement on the system. That means, of course, that all suppliers of unreliable, intermittent power will need to be able to guarantee 100% delivery by teaming up with coal, gas or a hydro generator. In fact, this used to be the requirement of the system. It was, until the Gillard-Rudd government dumped it in order to change the economics of building wind and solar. Now, I'll be upfront here, this is a very good idea, but it will only work if someone actually gets on and swiftly builds new coal-fired power at a baseload level, because right now, the states won't do it because they've passed the buck to the Commonwealth, the feds won't do it because they say it's not our job, and the private sector won't do it because they're scared of a new carbon tax from the next Labor government, which would make any return on investment impossible. So the result, unless something changes dramatically, is that we're left with power prices heading up, reliability heading down, and good jobs heading overseas to countries that are happy to burn Australian coal to give themselves cheap power, and jobs to their own people, jobs we used to have here at home. Then there's the Paradise Dam I mentioned at the start in Queensland, the last big dam built in this country that triggered hundreds of millions of new investment in agriculture around the Bundaberg area, because water is wealth. And if we can have more water, we can become the much promised food bowl to Asia. However, shoddy workmanship means that this dam now needs major repairs to bring it back to being able to hold 100% of its water capacity. And in a state like Queensland with big seasonal rains, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But that's not what Anastasia Palaszczuk says they'll do, because the cash-strapped Queensland government wants to do it on the cheap. And by doing it on the cheap, they'll permanently reduce this dam's capacity down to 55%. Partly, it's because the state's broke, yes. But partly it's also because of the dam phobia that now afflicts all centre-left governments fixated on climate change. But in the middle of a drought, one of the worst in living memory, dropping a dam from 100% to 55% should mean the end of her government at the upcoming state election. But, like with energy, we'll see.